Very warm for February, but that's Karachi. We are going to have a discussion on this book that has just come out. And the book is Pakistan's Search for Stability. The editor of this book also came out with a book, Pakistan Beyond the Crisis State, in April 2011. So April 2011 to Feb 2024, back then it was about beyond the crisis. This particular book talks about Polycrisis and how many crises now inflict the state of Pakistan, and perhaps Pakistan is struggling to find its way forward. I have two best brains in Pakistan to talk about it. One, of course, is the editor herself, Maleeha Lodhi, who was seen as a woman who would impact 21st century by Times magazines. And we are in the 21st century. So this book couldn't have been more timely. And then, of course, we have Chaudhry Aizaz Saab, who's a diplomat par excellence. He served as an ambassador to the US. He served as a head of Strategic Studies Institute, and has also authored a book and has his imprint on the political and foreign policy discourse of Pakistan. Is a very sought-after person and quietly counsels the government and all of us on how to get out of this situation. He will be talking about this book. But before much ado, I'd like to know if the author is with us online. So, hello, Maleeha. It's good to have you. I wish you were here. We are missing you.
Yes.
Before I move on...
Likewise.
You look lovely. I'm going to give you the floor to give us an intro of the book, and then from there I'll take it forward.
Thank you, Huma. I hope you can hear me all right. Is the sound working okay? Just wave out if it is. Okay.
The sound is perfect, actually.
I'm, of course, delighted to see Aizaz Chaudhry there. Thank you, Aizaz, for being there. I can always count on him. And, of course, on Huma, who's my favorite moderator. I'm always so delighted when they tell me that she's going to moderate the session. And a big thank you to KLF. I'm sorry I couldn't be there due to unavoidable reasons. But let me also say I'm so grateful to OUP for publishing my book, and to particularly Samuel Ray, who has worked so hard with me over many, many months. And I think I probably drove him quite crazy, but here we are. So, Huma, you wanted me to say a few words about the book. So let me start by saying that over a decade ago, I edited a book that you just mentioned called Pakistan Beyond the Crisis State. And that was inspired by the hope that the country would extricate itself from its crisis-ridden state and find a path to both economic and political stability. And underlying that hope were the socio-economic changes that were taking place in the country, which to me offered an enabling environment to break from an unedifying past of political turmoil and, of course, economic instability. So that volume was also aimed at correcting the flawed perspective of many outsiders who had mischaracterized the country and cast it in an extremely negative light. Now, this particular book, Search for Stability, The Search for Stability, takes the same conversation forward in the light, of course, of more recent and contemporary developments and events. But sadly, when one hoped that the country could have moved beyond a crisis, but it hasn't. It's still in a state of crisis. And in fact, as you also mentioned, we are confronting a polycrisis in which multiple overlapping crises, governance, economic, political, security, demographic, environmental, are all converging to reinforce each other and create an overall challenge more formidable than any single crisis, which is what a polycrisis is.
Maleeha, may I stop you for a minute? I
sure.
quote from your book. It says, flawed perspective of several outsiders who had mischaracterized the country. I went through the book, you've edited the book, you've contributed to the book. Were we able to actually do that? Is Pakistan's image more damaged today than it was in the past? And the contributors, the picture they've painted, although the book is contemporary, it has a flavor of history, but will it contribute towards Pakistan's image building? Do we have enough to do that?
I think my aim was not to build any image. My aim was to tell the truth. And the contributors, and I want to mention their names in a minute, and the aim of the contributors also was to speak truth to power. So when I say that I wanted to correct the flawed perspective of outsiders, the first book that is, it was because it was written after 9/11. And if you recall, at that time, all that Pakistan was being seen through was a single lens, and that lens was terrorism. And I wanted to make sure that people understood the depth, have a fuller view of Pakistan and its many, many dimensions. Pakistan wasn't just about terrorism. Of course, it was a huge challenge. It still is. But that doesn't mean that that's all there is to Pakistan. And I think that was the purpose. Now, whether we succeeded or not is best left to others to determine. But for this book, I have to just make a quick mention and express my gratitude to the very many distinguished professionals. In fact, I think the people who have contributed to my book, 18 of them, they are all among Pakistan's top public intellectuals. And I think what has bound us together is our belief that Pakistan can shift course, that its problems can be solved, and its challenges can be overcome.
I couldn't agree with you more. The contributors, it's like a list of who's who. The topics that have been tackled, the people who are literally the top names in the fields are there. I remember I was a part of the audience when Maleeha's first book was launched. And one of the criticisms I remember that came was that there is nothing on population. I don't know, Maleeha, if you remember that. So lo and behold, this particular book also has a chapter on population, and I think it's become one of the most critical issues for Pakistan amongst governance, economic mayhem, so on and so forth. It also has a historical flavor to it, where they trace the history, Duksha does it, as to how Quaid-e-Azam perceived it and where it is today. This particular festival has that flavor. We also had that movie that you were a commentator on, where we saw the return of Gandhi and Jinnah to contemporary Pakistan. Chaudhry Sahab, what is your take on the book? What initially, also why did you agree to contribute to the book?
All
Other than that Maleeha asked you.
All right, thank you. Well, that in itself is a very strong reason for me to contribute when Maleeha asks you something, because she's a top-notch scholar, and I have had a very, fruitful working relationship with her. Now, my own starting point would also be the book that Maleeha edited some 12 years ago. That was beyond the crisis state, which basically meant that Pakistan was a country that was moving from one crisis to the other. How do we arrest that trend, and how do we put into place a process where we have political stability and economic viability? But in the 12 years that have passed by, to be honest, we haven't really made much progress in that direction. I think political instability has remained rampant. I think economic weaknesses have compounded. I think law and order has weakened. And I think the security dilemmas emanating from our neighborhood have also accentuated. So it's not a very happy state of affairs. So when this book was being conceived and when Maleeha approached all of us, including me, the idea was how do we bring the much needed stability to Pakistan in every realm. Precisely 4 clusters of national life have been covered: the politics of Pakistan, the economy of Pakistan, society of Pakistan in many facets of it, and the foreign policy. So I think we've all written respective chapters with a view to suggesting how can we bring in or contribute more stability to Pakistan's life as a nation. I think that's what we have done. Whether we have succeeded in that or not is for the readers to judge. But my own sense is, and the way, and you asked me why did I contribute to it, because I feel that those of us who have already taken enough from the table, and it's time to pay it forward. It is time to pay back based on our own experience, to let the nation benefit from all the wisdom that we had accumulated or not accumulated. So this is one. And the second reason I believe is, and I recently wrote an article last Sunday, to be precise, on hope is everything. I believe that it is us and nobody from outside which will stabilize Pakistan, which will which will show the way forward. So and I believe there is a lot that Pakistan can offer.
Hold on to your thought. Malia, if I may bring you back into the discussion. Like pointed out by Chaudhry Saab, the book is divided into politics, economy, society, foreign policy, and you're committed to this fact, all the contributors that Pakistan can get out of this crisis. Beyond crisis and now polycrisis. How long do you think it will take for us to actually move beyond the polycrisis now, move towards stability? Because you see, we thought there is a government that is not good enough, and then there was a no-confidence move, and then there was a caretaker government, and now we've had elections, but stability continues to elude us. Malia, are you with us? Have you lost Malia? Perhaps till we get her back, would you like to respond to that? How long, sir? Because, I mean, really, it was 2011 when she wrote Beyond Crisis. It's 2024. We've been in the midst of polycrisis for at least last 2 years. Everybody was hoping elections will bring stability. We are still in the midst of what I call a lot of instability, and also disillusionment and a disgruntled youth, and some people say a rudderless Pakistan.
Well, yes, I think we got lost. I'm sorry, we got disconnected.
Okay. Malia, are you back? Did you hear my question?
Your question was, how long would it take to get out of this crisis, right?
Yes, and how long? And, you know, it's time that we should have at least a path to move on.
You know, the path has always been known. We know the solutions to our problems. And I think if you go through the 19 chapters of this book, you know, as I said, we have the best public intellectuals of the country addressing these issues and telling us how do we move forward. The problem, of course, lies with our ruling elites. And I think we are at an inflection point right now. To your question, how long will it take? First of all, the challenge is that unless it's a question of either we reform or perish. So what Pakistan needs are wide-ranging reforms. The question then is that, I mean, we know the prescription I've often said that Pakistan is one of the most overdiagnosed countries in the world. And we've diagnosed it ourselves over and over and over and over again. But the prescription is also known. We know exactly what we need to do to fix our country, especially to fix the economy. But we have ruling elites who are not, they're not reformist.
So we have an analysis paralysis and we have a prescriptive paralysis. So,
No, Huma. No.
Okay,
We have a political paralysis.
I'm glad you
No, we
contradicted
have a
me.
political
Please go ahead.
paralysis. We have a political paralysis. We do not have everything is out there and it's not rocket science. It really is not rocket science. We know exactly what to do. But we do need people who in government who believe in all of this, who believe in reform, who believe in the public welfare, who believe in the public interest, which goes beyond their own sort of narrow interests.
Let me take this question to Chaudhry Sahab. Sir,
okay.
Maleeha disagrees with me. And I'm going to open it for Q&A after your response. I think there's an analysis paralysis. We've done enough of it. There is also a prescriptive paralysis because we keep coming up with prescriptions to resolve things, reforms. We have 15 chapters by 15 top brains of Pakistan in this book who actually tell us what is the way forward. Somehow, nobody is listening. Do you also have that feeling that nobody is listening?
Yeah, that does come to my mind quite often, but I do not get deterred by that because we have to do what we have to do. You were talking about the future. I think it is hazardous to predict future in a situation in which Pakistan is. But I heard Miftah Ismail talk yesterday, and yes. I thought he made sense when he mentioned that Bangladesh was where we were. We are today in 1990. India was where we are today in 1990. But look, things have changed. And look at China, and look at Singapore, and look at UAE. There are countless examples of countries which hit a rock bottom and then bounced back. I think I have every confidence that Pakistan can do that. There are a couple of major decisions that we must take. And it's not just the political leadership, but one of them is political leadership. I think they need to sit down and have some kind of consensus that the parliamentary form of government, the way they have implemented it or tried to run it, has not delivered stability to Pakistan. So they need to work out a consensus, and it's not very difficult because there is a constitution, but they have to find out a way by which every stakeholder in the constitution would live and abide by that consensus. The second is the Charter of Economy. There too, I think the political governments have to agree that you need continuity of economic policies in order for process to continue. And so they have to arrive at that as part of that consensus that we will not bring major changes in the economic policies. Look, for example, when Narasimha Rao started opening up India's economy, the BJP government didn't change that direction. In fact, they reinforced that, whereas we have been experimenting. Another 2 points that I think bring hope to me. One was a sort of a national security policy that brought out the concept of comprehensive national security, that national security should not be viewed in narrow terms of military security alone, but economic security and human security are equally important. In fact, it says that primacy be accorded to economic security because unless वो कहते हैं ना घर में अगर दाने नहीं हैं तो आप कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते हैं. So I think that was an important message, and our political and military leadership would do us well by taking that seriously. Another good idea that has emanated not only from Pakistan but from the experience of the rest of the world is geoeconomic pivots. I think the whole world has realized that you need to leverage your geography, if you want to really make difference in your life. But look at Pakistan. 3 of our borders are insecure and unstable. That's not good. That's not a geoeconomic pivot.
So let me take this to Maleeha. Maleeha, from what I understood from what you said and from what the ambassador just said is that, it's polycrisis, But we can't resolve our polycrisis because there's also a lot of polarization. And that is why consistency, which is identified as a way forward for perhaps Bangladesh or perhaps India, is what Pakistan can't achieve. And this political polarization is only getting worse, which is then impacting our polycrisis. So does your book in some way address the issue of political polarization and how it has impacted all four, politics, economy, society, and foreign policy?
Yes, Huma, very much so. Very much so. My own contribution, my own chapter in this book, which is about fault lines and governance failures, actually goes into the more recent. I mean, Pakistan has always had a polarized polity. I mean, if you look at the 90s, you had this polarization between the People's Party and the Muslim League of Nawaz Sharif. Deep divide at that time. Previous to that and subsequent to that, because of military rule, we also had deep polarization. There were those who supported military rule. There were those who opposed military rule. But the polarization we have today is even more deep. It's much deeper because what it has done is it has divided families, communities, society. And I think this really needs to be addressed absolutely. But one of the things that has not been mentioned so far is also something that I deal with and others also deal with in the political section of the book. And that is how hybrid, this so-called hybrid form
of government,
of government or governance, I mean, we do not see this to be working. We think it's dysfunctional. We think, we meaning me and my other colleagues, I speak on their behalf, because, you know, if you look
so,
at...
Malia, just a naughty question here. So now we have a name hybrid for what we've always been doing. And your book mentions about the Asghar Khan case.
Well, it does mention that, and in a very good chapter by one of the country's top constitutional lawyers, Salman Akram Raja. And of course, we have others also writing on our very checkered parliamentary history that Aizaz was also referring to. But you know, the lack of political consensus in the country, and if I can just make one more point about hybrid governance, the thing is, if the people of Pakistan have voted for democracy in this election. What have they voted for? Democracy. When given a chance, they always vote for democracy. What does democracy mean? Democracy means that those who have been elected, the elected representatives of the people must govern. I'm afraid hybrid polity doesn't quite do that. What it sets up is a dialectical system.
Malia, I hate to stop you because I want to ask you just very burning question. So when we say that our civil-military relations have always been a bit like what they are, and now we have a name to it, which is called hybrid regimes, but you've also talked about transformative trends in your book. You know, what has changed in Pakistan, which perhaps is challenging the continuity of this? Would you want to comment on that?
Yes, happily. I think, first of all, Huma, I think it'd be right to say it's not that we have a name for it now. It's because it's a different phenomenon altogether. Pakistan has alternated, as you know, between military rule and periods of civilian government, which were often disrupted by military interventions or presidential interventions backed by the military. That's the reality. Yes. That's the history. But what we have now, or have had for the last several years, hybrid governance is something different. It is that formally you have a democratic system, but informally the military exercises extensive power over governance to an extent that was not really evident, or it was not the case under previous periods of civilian rule. Sure, the military always had a strong voice. Indeed, it would have a strong voice because our security concerns are what they are. So they will have a strong voice.
So because of constitutional amendments, what was happening in the past was not possible anymore, and thus this?
I think, moving ahead, I think let's look at the second aspect of your question, because I think we pretty much exhausted the hybrid part. What was the second part of your question? You were looking ahead to see, what the socio-economic changes that
I was talking about
perhaps
the
have created.
transformative
Yeah.
trends, the
Yes,
active
exactly.
civil
So
society,
let
the
me,
media, the
yeah,
information
yeah.
overflow.
I think I think the transformative developments have been, one, the expansion of a middle class in Pakistan, much bigger middle class. And it's also a middle class that's not inert. It is assertive. It wants a voice in the governance of the country. And of course, the second factor is a more assertive, youthful population. We've always had a youthful population. It's just much larger now. And in absolute numbers, it's huge. And we saw what they did in this recent election when they came out to vote. The third, I think, transformative development is greater urbanization of Pakistan. I think that also is loosening traditional forms of loyalty, allegiances, alignment, which we've also seen evidence in this recent election, because some of these so-called electables were defeated. In Gujranwala, for example, Dastagir was defeated. His father was also in the assembly. I mean, I'm just giving him as an example. He's a fine, honorable man. So I don't mean to in any way belittle him. And then, of course, we have what you just described, the technological revolution, which means that people have in their hands a mobile phone and, of course, access to the media, television, etc., which they didn't before to the extent that they have now. And that's empowered them. It's empowered them and made them more informed. And an informed citizenry says to those who govern that we need to have our voices heard. And
So,
they have the means to get their voices heard.
Of course.
So
these
this is changing the landscape. But I have to say that our politics, our representative politics, has not kept pace with these changes.
Okay.
And now we are seeing that some of the new let's say, developments in our politics is showing that there is an effort by at least one political party to respond to some of this. There are,
So if
I would say there are dynamics of change.
Dynamics have changed. So there are certain beneficiaries of the system who also have clout and control. And now, on the other side, we have people who are more informed, disgruntled, disillusioned, who are challenging these powers of status quo. So do you think this power of change and this power of status quo, the tussle, is what is keeping Pakistan down and we can't develop a consensus? We can't give in to powers of change?
This is one key element, but I think at the heart of our governance crisis is the tussle between a strong center and devolution of powers to the grassroots level. If you look at the various interviews these TV reporters take, everybody's complaining that my streets are dirty, that I don't have drains, that I have all the municipal issues. Why? Why does it happen? Because the 18th Amendment brought resources to the provinces, but not to the districts and tehsils.
And also no accountability and capacity building.
For that. So what you are trying to do now is not to send those resources to the grassroots level, but back to the center. Because the center says that before deducting all its liabilities, we are sending the money to provinces, and provinces do not send it downwards. So the chief ministers are sitting on tons of money, and they end up doing mega projects because they're not interested in...
But isn't that a micro level thing? Don't you think there's a larger issue? The larger issue of consensus between those who want the system to continue because they benefit from it. All of this is also because they benefit from it. And I beg to differ with Maleeha, where she says that hybrid is where they want to rule. I think hybrid is a direct product of the constitutional amendments that happened and did not allow direct intervention of the past. So, but once again, every time Pakistan is in a bit of a crisis, we don't look for a political solution. We look for alternatives. Maleeha, last word on that, and then I'll open the floor for Q&A. We've again lost Malia. Once we get her back, we'll talk about it. Now, may we open the floor for Q&A?
I think that's a good idea.
Let's do that. Let's hear there's a lot of wisdom in the audience also.
Or youngsters se lein.
Youngsters se bhi lenge. So we'll start at the back. We'll start from the back and then we'll move forward. Please. Hurry up. We don't want to lose time. Ji, please go ahead. Just introduce yourself. Do we have a question there? Seema, आप पूछना चाह रही हैं? Okay, Seema, please, Seema Tahir. दीजिए, आपके बराबर बैठी हैं, आपके बराबर बैठी हैं. जी, जी.
Very interesting observations, very interesting discourse. But, if you attend an SDPI webinar or you attend a conference, everywhere the consensus at the end of the day is what is lacking is integrated approaches. What is lacking is expert opinions and an expert framework coming to the policymaker where you have the right kind of people given their input before a policy is made. So whether it is in education, health, or environment or development, you do need experts with a diverse experience to come in and give their point of view before a policy is drafted and before, and in fact,
and you think we don't do that?
We don't do that.
Okay.
And before it is implemented, the government has changed.
The government has
Consistency
changed.
is nahi rehti.
So there's again lack of consistency.
Yeah.
And by the way, this book does just that. It brings the best brains of Pakistan and they give their input on most pertinent issues. But the question is to you.
Well, I think on policy planning process, I think she is absolutely spot on. You do need expertise. And I think there is something that we can also learn from the India's recent experience where they have done away with the Planning Commission and they have created what is called Niti Aayog. And Niti is the National Institution for Transforming India. So what this does is that it brings together, it's called Public Think Tank now. It's not Planning Commission, Public Think Tank. So what it does is that it brings together all the expert opinions, experts, and then they produce transformative ideas, which then become the basis for
Yes,
government.
apparently we have ideas. There's probably nobody listening, and of course there's zero implementation. But we'll probably take more questions. To you, madam, with this, please introduce yourself also.
So I don't know whether we have Malia back yet or not, but I'll ask the question. Malia, my name is Arif Zaman, and I'm from London. Malia, one of your earlier books, if I recall, was called Encounter with Democracy. And what I wanted to ask was, looking at the timing of your book.
We'll have to direct your question to the ambassador. Malia is not with us anymore.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
She's with us.
I'm very much here.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood him. Please go ahead.
Excellent. So Malia, it's Arif here.
Yes, go ahead.
So Malia, my question is, I was just saying that I know one of your earlier books, if I'm correct, was called Encounter with Democracy. And my question is, what would you say to the question around Pakistan's experience of and expectations around democracy with the book coming out right now in a year where on the international front we're seeing incredible uncertainty with so many elections and so much happening on so many agendas and fronts. Where do you think Pakistan's the reaction to this book internationally will be?
Thank you. I think your point has come. Malia, over to you.
Okay, you can hear me all right?
Yes, you're very
let's hope the
audible.
technology. Let's hope the technology stays with us. I think Pakistan's democratic experience, as we all know, has been a very checkered one. But the reason for that are the disruptions that have taken place to democracy, and of course the inability of those who were working democracy to show tolerance for each other, so to speak. So political parties have lacked the kind of tolerance that was needed. Not all, but most of them. And of course, we've had repeated disruptions to democracy. But remember, people's faith in democracy has never faltered. It has never failed. It's always been there. Whenever people have been given a chance, they have voted for democracy, as I said they did in this election. But we have seen that both under civilian governments more recently, and also, of course, under military governments, it's kind of an obvious thing. We've seen the erosion of civil liberties and an intolerance of dissent, and of course, crackdowns from time to time against non-governmental organizations for different reasons. So, in that sense, Pakistan is like much of the rest of the world in our neighborhood. Look at our immediate neighbor, India, and the kind of democratic regression that's taken place there. Supposed to be the world's largest democracy, but today, look at what's happening there. So we are seeing democratic erosion and democratic regression across the world, in established democracies and also in more emerging democracies. So we are part of a global trend, but I think we need to be, obviously focused on ourselves. It's all very well to say, well, it's happening elsewhere, so it's happening here as well. What we need to do is to guard our democratic freedoms jealously, to ensure that whoever people have voted for in any election are the ones that are given the right to form a government, and that if there are disputes over, allegations of, let's say, election irregularities, they must be investigated, because the people must not be let down. They have done their bit. It's now for the authorities to live up to their responsibility and make sure that the mandate that the people have given to whoever they've given it to is respected and not violated.
People must not be let down. I think that's the crux. Okay, you go ahead. हाँ, और आप उर्दू में भी बात कर सकते हैं, कोई मसला नहीं है. आप कर लीजिए.
We have seen many US lawmakers raise concerns over the transparency of the recently conducted and concluded elections in Pakistan. And it has also caught the attention of international media, and every day important international publications are publishing
Comment
articles.
on our elections. Okay,
etc.
so I will let you respond.
So as a result of that, do you think that US, UK, and other important Western powers will recognize whatever the regime that will be
अभी तो
installed
government बनी नहीं है
as a
ना?
result of
अभी
that?
तो government बनने दे. But I'll let you respond to that.
देखिए, दुनिया में अमेरिका समेत हर जगह, जिस तरह मलीहा कह रही थी कि डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेसेस में बड़ी डिसरप्शंस आ रही हैं, रिग्रेशन आ रही है. अमेरिका के अंदर भी बड़ा इस वक्त अगर आप बात कर लें, एक दो बैठे हुए मुझे नज़र आ रहे हैं अमेरिकी शहरी, और अगर आप उनसे पूछें तो वो बड़े परेशान हैं अमेरिका के अपने डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस के बारे में. तो इस बात से कतई नज़र कि दुनिया हमें क्या देख रही है और क्या सोच रही है, ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि हम क्या अपने इससे मुतमिन हैं कि नहीं. और मैं बिल्कुल इत्तेफाक करता हूँ मलीहा साहिबा से कि इतनी पॉलिटिकल डिसरप्शंस है, और ये सब उसका हिस्सा है. जब ट्रांसपेरेंसी नहीं हो, ओपेसिटी हो, तो अगर आप प्रोसेस को चलने देते, यानी हर हुकूमत 5-5 साल के बाद, तो 3-4 साइकिल्स में सब चीज़ें जो है वो खुद वो ठीक हो जाती, क्योंकि लोगों का ईमान अभी तक वोट पे कायम है. ये कितनी अफसोस की बात है कि आज तक पाकिस्तान में 76 साल के बाद भी कोई भी एक ऐसा वज़ीर आज़म नहीं आया जिसने अपनी टर्म पूरी की.
जी, वो मैं एक साध हारून की स्टैंड अप कॉमेडी में थी. उसने कहा उस बंदे को वोट ना दें जिसको आप पसंद करते हैं, उसको दें जिसको आप पसंद नहीं करते, क्योंकि हम अपने प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स के साथ बहुत बुरा करते हैं. बट दैट वाज ऑन अ लाइटर नोट. बट एसेंशियली देयर इज इकोनॉमिक रिसेशन and there is democratic recession. That's the global trend. I've been asked to wind up. मैडम, में ये बच्चे हैं पीछे, मैं फिर आपके पास आती हूँ.
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम, फरहान नाम है मेरा. सर, आपसे मेरा सवाल ये है कि बांग्लादेश की अभी बात हुई और आपने कहा कि मिफ्ता साहब ने का हवाला देते हुए आपने कहा कि वो रॉक बॉटम पे 1990 में पहुंच गए थे और उसके बाद उन्होंने बाउंस बैक किया है. लेकिन सर, मैं जब उनको देखता हूँ तो वहाँ पे भी पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी हमारी तरह बहुत ज़्यादा रही है, मिलिट्री इंटरवेंशन बहुत ज़्यादा रही है, जैसा कि हमारे यहाँ है. तो ऐसा उन्होंने क्या किया है कि वो उस पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी के बावजूद एक कंसेंसस में रहे हैं, अपनी
इकोनॉमिक कंसेंसस,
एक इकोनॉमिक और अपने एक्सपोर्ट्स के बलबूते.
हम चाह रहे हैं एक दो सवाल और ले लें, आप बैठ जाए. विल टेक 2. आप बात पीछे बच्चा एक और है, और फिर मैडम को दे दीजिएगा. बच्चा पीछे बैठा हुआ है. मैं चाह रही हूँ जो यंग बच्चे हैं उनसे बात कर लें, इनको बात का मौका नहीं मिलता है. बोलो बेटा.
Hello everyone. My question is on the behalf of youngsters.
हाँ बोलो.
So हमारा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आजकल इस डिजिटल एरा में जब हम देखते हैं कि यहाँ पे बहुत सारी पॉपुलिज्म और कल्ट फॉलोअर है यंगस्टर्स के दरमियान, तो आपके पास वो कौन से सॉल्यूशंस हैं कि उनको हम अट्रैक्ट करें एक बेटर थिंकिंग और ऑप्टिमिस्टिक थिंकिंग और टू रीड दीज सच अ मास्टर क्लास ऑफ बुक्स मरियम लोधी साहिबा.
ठीक
मलिया
है,
लोधी
आपका
साहिबा.
सवाल आ गया. एक सवाल और लेंगे एंड देन विल कम बैक. बस ये सवाल और ले लीजिए और क्योंकि वक्त बिल्कुल मेरे पास ख़त्म हो गया है. जी फरमाइए.
Thank you. मेरा सवाल आपसे ये है, and that is on the internal factors causing the instability. Within that, as far as I understand, in 2022, the richest people who benefited from this country were 4 sectors. 2 were Jagirdars and 2 were other institutions. So the question to you is, within Pakistan, how can we control the ever-increasing riches of the topmost and ever-expanding poverty of the lowest socially class? Because that's what its status is. And I can't understand.
I'm afraid I'll have to stop you there. Malia, would you like to respond to that? What should the youth...
I think yes, very quickly, I would say, ये ठीक कह रही हैं. एक तो inequality in Pakistan has been increasing. Poverty has been rising, sadly, even though anti-poverty campaigns were carried out previously by, previous governments. But in recent years, the human development indicators have really shown that Pakistan has fallen in the global index of human development. Now, when that happens, then what we are sowing the seeds of deep social instability. And what Huma was describing earlier as disaffection, discontent, unrest. So, we've got to be very careful to see how we can address inequalities. And of course, one of the ways in which you do it is through tax reform. Right now, the poorest people in our country have the heaviest burden because of indirect taxation, because we do not raise enough direct taxation. We do not tax several sectors. Agriculture, service sector, we're unable to collect the amount that we should be collecting. On property, the property tax is very, very poorly, inefficiently collected. So what happens is that the entire burden falls on the poor, on those least able to bear this burden. Now, all of these issues have to be addressed by economic reforms. And that's where we started this discussion today. And that's where my book, I hope, has some of the strongest chapters in the book are written by economists, some of whom have been practitioners. And, they propose ways in which we can address these issues.
एक मलिया कमेंट कीजिएगा जो उस बच्चे का सवाल था कि जो एक कल्ट फॉलोइंग है उसको काउंटर करने के लिए इनके पास क्या टूल्स हैं, इनको क्या करना चाहिए?
नहीं देखिए ना, ये तो it's up to people who they want to follow.
Okay, आप कमेंट कीजिएगा.
And digital technology gives
actually
you the
this is true, in some ways एक शायद ये भी मसला है.
मेरा ये ख्याल है कि अगर
and also I think digital tools give you the means to express what you want. There's no point just demonizing somebody if you do not stand up and explain what you want. And I think that's the problem. अगर आप TV on करें इस वक्त, सारा वक्त एक दूसरे को demonize कर रहे होते हैं.
लेकिन मेरा ये दिल चाहता है कि मैं ये कहूँ कि आपके पास बहुत sources of information है, तो strive to make an informed decision. हर्ड मेंटालिटी से शायद बाहर निकलने की ज़रूरत है. एजाज साहब
जी, मेरा ख्याल है जो एनवायरनमेंट बनती है जिसमें पॉलिटिकल डिसरप्शंस इतनी ज़्यादा हों, अगर प्रोसेस चलता रहे तो कल्ट फॉलोइंग नहीं होगी, क्योंकि पॉलिटिकल प्रोसेस तो होता ही कलेक्टिव डिसीजन मेकिंग है. तो इसलिए मेरा नहीं ख्याल कि ये सिर्फ उस सूरत में होता है जब पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त सिचुएशन है, इसमें ये ख़तरा रहता है. मैं दूसरे 2 सवालों को भी क्विकली देख लूँ. बांग्लादेश की बात की है. बांग्लादेश ने इकनॉमिक प्रोग्रेस एंड प्रॉस्पेरिटी को बड़ा यानी सही मानों में अहमियत दी है. और मुझे याद है कि मैं जब अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा में बड़े साल रहा तो वहाँ पे बांग्लादेश के एक परमानेंट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव थे जो बाद में उनके वज़ीर ख़ारजा भी बने, वो तमाम वक्त मैं देखता था कि वो सिर्फ़ और सिर्फ LDCs के जो इकोनॉमिक वेलफेयर के लिए काम करते थे और पॉपुलेशन डेवलपमेंट पॉलिसीज़ के लिए काम करते थे। तो उन दोनों शोबों में, चूँकि प्रायोरिटी गवर्नमेंट की ये थी, आप दोनों में रिजल्ट्स देख रहे हैं उनके, और उसमें ठीक है शेख हसीना ने क्वाजी डिक्टेटरशिप कायम की हुई है, लेकिन इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज़ और प्राइमेसी को कभी नहीं छोड़ा, और परहैप्स इन सम वेज वी विल आल्सो नीड टू रीच दैट कंसेंसस समवेयर। एक और बात आपने की थी इक्वालिटीज़ की जी, बिसाइड्स द वर्टिकल इनक्वालिटीज़ जो between rich and poor, there are also horizontal inequalities between various regions of Pakistan.
Absolutely.
और वो ये जो distortions आती हैं उसकी वजह से the faith of people in the country's ability to deliver वो कम होता जाता है। तो जो बहुत अमीर हैं वो फिर पैसा अपना बाहर पार्क करते हैं, उनका ख्याल है कि
हाँ, और उसको रोकने का हमारे पास कोई तरीका नहीं है। मुझे बिल्कुल अब वक्त नहीं है कि हम मज़ीद बात कर सकें या मज़ीद सवाल ले सकें। We have to, somebody just said 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll take your question. I'm sorry. जी, फरमाइए। आप भी, अब हम सवाल ले सकते हैं 2-3, बहुत उम्दा बात है। जी, फरमाइए। हाँ, तीनों इकट्ठे ले लेते हैं, फिर इकट्ठे जवाब देते हैं। आप ये यहाँ पर अजीज साहब से ले लें। चलिए, आप बहुत देर से हाथ उठाए। Then bring the mic here. The gentleman in the blue kurta.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम
जी, वालेकुम।
मैं ईसा पीरज़ादा हूँ और मेरा क्वेश्चन है सर से। ही इज़ वेरी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड पर्सनालिटी इंटरनेशनल एंड नेशनल लेवल पर। माय क्वेश्चन इज दैट आवर पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमी इज़ वेरी पुअर एंड आवर रुपी इज़ वेरी डिवैल्यूड। ओनली काइंडली मेंशन 2 रीजन फॉर दैट पर्पज। आई विल बी हाईली थैंकफुल टू यू। थैंक यू।
I don't have economist on my session, but we'll see. जी,
बांग्लादेश की बात होती है तो उसमें वहाँ 2 फैक्टर जो हैं उनकी कभी बात नहीं हुई। मसलन उन्होंने पॉलिसी मेकिंग के उससे इदारे पॉलिसी मेकिंग के अंदर फ़ौज को बहुत पीछे कर दिया है और मौलवियों को बहुत ख़त्म कर दिया है। क्या कोई इन चीज़ों का कोई पाकिस्तान के ऊपर असर है या नहीं है, और अगर है तो क्यों नहीं इसके ऊपर गुफ्तगू होती?
बहुत शुक्रिया। मलिया, आप रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहेंगी इस पर्टिकुलर सवाल को? मलिया है हमारे साथ? जी
हाँ, I'm here.
जी, उन्होंने कहा कि बांग्लादेश की ग्रोथ मॉडल।
मैंने सुन लिया। मैंने सुन लिया।
फरमाइए।
देखें, बात ये है कि it's not a question of comparing ourselves with another country. We need to look at what the root causes of our own economic malaise are. The root causes are the state of Pakistan, जो रियासत है हमारी या जो हुकूमत है, it spends more than it earns. Simple. So it has to raise resources. Number 2, we import more than we export. So we constantly have a cash flow dollar crisis. So we need to export more than we import. यानी कि इतनी basic fundamental चीज़ें हैं, लेकिन जब हुकूमतें आती हैं तो वो एड्रेस नहीं कर पाती हैं इन फंडामेंटल कॉजेज़ को। जब तक ये रूट कॉजेज़ हम नहीं एड्रेस करेंगे, और ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट की फिर से मैं बात करती हूँ, आई एम श्योर KLF में सेशन हुआ होगा, जब तालीम आप नहीं दे पाते अपने लोगों को, अपने बच्चों को, 22 million of us children school going age don't have access to school, वो स्कूल ही नहीं जाते। तो
और जो जाते हैं उन्हें पढ़ना नहीं आता।
कभी इकोनॉमिक प्रोग्रेस किसी मुल्क की, बांग्लादेश को तो छोड़ें आप, किसी डेवलपिंग कंट्री की इकोनॉमिक प्रोग्रेस कभी नहीं प्रेडिकेट हुई ऑन एन इलिटरेट बेस। अनलेस यू हैव एन बेस ऑफ एजुकेटेड पीपल, स्किल्ड वर्कफोर्स, आप इकोनॉमिक प्रोग्रेस कैसे कर सकते हैं? So the question is not to compare Pakistan to another country. The question is, we know what's wrong with us. We know what we need to do to fix it. We just need to fix it.
Need to fix it. Aizaz Shoaib साहब, आपका comment लिया।
We need to have a leadership. We need to have a leadership that is committed to fixing it.
आपको लगता है crisis of leadership भी है? बीच में मेरा दिल चाह रहा है मैं भी एक सवाल पूछ लूँ। Do we have a crisis of leadership? आपके सवाल का जवाब आया सर?
अच्छा ठीक। अच्छा, मैं इस पे सर एम्पलीफाई कर दूं कि ये जो लिविंग बियॉन्ड मीन्स है, इसमें बड़ी हकीकत है क्योंकि जब आप अपने सरकारी या गैर सरकारी खर्चे कम नहीं करते हैं तो आप बोरोइंग करते हैं, और जब आप बोरोइंग करते हैं तो आपका डेट बर्डन बढ़ता है, तो फिर आप कौमी बैंकों से कर्जा लेते हैं या नोट प्रिंट करते हैं, तो फिर आपका हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन आ जाती है,
फिर डॉलर बढ़ जाते हैं।
तो फिर आप मतलब है कि इस तरह तो कभी भी नहीं चल सकेगा ना। वो कहते हैं ना कि चादर देखकर अपना
मतलब पुराना मुहावरा है, लेकिन हम तो चादर ही फट गई।
Ma'am, as you have said, we are going through multiple crises.
जी,
So
polycrisis,
how
जी।
we can prioritize our
Prioritize,
where
जी।
to begin with. For instance, if we have to start with economy or start with politics, and then
मेरा ख्याल है कंसेंसस इकोनॉमी पे है, लेकिन मलिहा से पूछ लेते हैं।
Okay.
मलिहा, व्हाट शुड बी अ प्रायोरिटी?
देखिए, I think the one thing we have to recognize now is that these crises are interconnected. You cannot address one without addressing the other. We don't have that luxury of choice. अगर मुल्क में सिक्योरिटी नहीं होगी तो पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी नहीं होगी, पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी नहीं होगी तो आप अपने इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस को नहीं एड्रेस कर सकते. So you have to do all these simultaneously. But naturally, the key is to have an environment where there is at least a degree of political stability and you do not foresee disruptions. अगर आपको पता ही नहीं है कि ये हुकूमत 8 महीने रहेगी, जो भी, ये नहीं कह रही कि जो आने वाली हुकूमत की बात नहीं कर रही हूँ मैं, खैर उस पर भी सवाल उठ रहा है, लेकिन लेट्स से इफ अगर यही सवाल सारा वक्त उठता है और दूसरा सवाल उठता है कि जी अथॉरिटी कितनी है, कि कितनी पॉलिसी ये बना भी सकते हैं कि नहीं, और तीसरी चीज़ ये है कि इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स की कमिटमेंट नहीं है अगर, तो हाउ आर वी गोइंग टू मूव फॉरवर्ड.
लेकिन अभी तक मलिया और एजाज साहब हम जो बात कर रहे हैं ना, वो मसाइल की बात कर रहे हैं. मेरा दिल चाह रहा है 5 मिनट मलिया आप और 5 मिनट आप हल की तरफ भी आ जाएं. हल क्या है? व्हाट इज द वे फॉरवर्ड? वन लास्ट क्वेश्चन इन दैट. जी सर, प्लीज, एक सवाल भी है, वो भी ले लेते हैं.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
वालेकुम
ज़हीर शरफ. आई एम एन ओवरसीज़ पाकिस्तानी और आजकल यहाँ इस प्रोग्राम के लिए मैं ख़ास तौर पर आया. एजाज़ चौधरी साहब और मलिया लोधी से मुलाकात भी है, लेकिन माई क्वेश्चन इज़ दिस कि ये शायद जो बांग्लादेश के अभी मॉडल से जो कंपेयर किया जा रहा है, डोंट यू थिंक कि आप लोग ये तो बात कर रहे हैं कि इकनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट यूँ आएगी, लेकिन जो स्टेबिलिटी है अगर यहाँ पे डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट्स को अगर आपने कायम नहीं होने दिया तो किस तरह आ सकती है स्टेबिलिटी? इसके ऊपर तो कुछ कहें.
जी, इस पे कंसेंसस है तकरीबन कि वी नीड पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी, और ये भी कि डेमोक्रेसी नीड्स टू बी गिवन इट स्पेस. इसके बारे में बात हुई है. अब मैं मलिहा और फिर जी प्लीज़. हाँ
जी, मेरा ख्याल है कि अपार्ट फ्रॉम लॉट एल्स दैट मस्ट हैपन, 2 एरियाज़ में बहुत तेज़ी से काम करने की ज़रूरत है. एक तो यूथ के ऊपर, बिकॉज जिस तरह कल अरशद सईद हुसैन भी कह रहे थे कि जी 2048 तक यूथ ही डिटरमिन करेगी कि कौन सी गवर्नमेंट्स आती हैं, तो उनकी तालीम और उनकी जो रिक्वायरमेंट्स हैं और जो उनकी आईटी स्किल्स हैं और दूसरी स्किल्स हैं, उसके ऊपर काम अगर हम करें हंगामी बुनियादों पर, तो दैट वुड रियली सर्व अस वेल. द सेकंड एरिया इज़ क्लाइमेट चेंज, क्योंकि ये एक एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट है और हमें मतलब अंदाज़ा नहीं हो रहा है कि अगर ये ग्लेशियर्स मेल्ट होना शुरू हों तो क्या होगा. एक क़यामत आ जाएगी, और ये इसके ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा काम हम अभी तक भरोसा करके बैठे हैं कि वो जो पेरिस अकॉर्ड हुआ था दिसंबर 2015 में, उससे पैसे आएंगे और हो जाए. पैसे नहीं आएंगे. यू नीड टू डेवलप योर इन हाउस एक्सपर्टीज़, क्योंकि आपके पास एक्सपर्ट्स हैं. मैं इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ स्ट्रेटेजिक स्टडीज़ में 20 एक्टिविटीज़ अरेंज की और आई वाज सरप्राइज कि कितना नॉलेज बेस है पाकिस्तान में इसके ऊपर. हमें उनको इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए, एंड आई थिंक वी कैन.
बस सर, हम पढ़े लिखे लोगों की बातें सुनते नहीं है ना. मलिया, लास्ट वर्ड आपका.
देखिए, लास्ट आप ये कह रही थी सॉल्यूशंस की तो हम बात करते रहे हैं ना. हम तो इसी सेशन में यही कहते रहे हैं. आई हैव बीन एम्फसाइजिंग द नीड, वन, for democratic continuity, consensus amongst political parties on how Pakistan is to be governed. Democracy is not just something that happens at election time. It's also what happens between elections. So the ability to show tolerance and mutual accommodation to each other, and to see politics as a game of winning and losing, not a war in which you have to eliminate the enemy. हमारे यहाँ तो ये है ना, it's the war ethic or the war paradigm that guides political behavior. तो ये तो politics हो गया. जहाँ तक economics का ताल्लुक है, मैं तो वापस आऊँगी तालीम पे, because unless we at least begin the process of ensuring that 22 million of our children do have access to school and proper schools, not just brick and mortar, how are we going to create the base, the foundation for economic well-being or economic progress? And then, of course, wide-ranging economic reforms. Wide-ranging economic reforms in which we right-size and downsize the government. The government should have no business to interfere in business, in my opinion.
Yes.
It should provide an effective regulatory framework, a business-friendly one, and of course, tax reform. We have to tax the people who do not pay tax. We have to raise resources and stop depending on outsiders for bailouts, which denigrates our country, which takes away the pride of a country. अगर आप हर 6 महीने बाद किसी के पास भागे जाते हैं पैसे मांगने के लिए, तो क्या pride रहती है एक मुल्क में? कौन सी pride है फिर? So we must reclaim Pakistan, and Pakistan must also be responsive. यानी कि रियासत should be responsive to what people want, not what the रियासत imposes on people. It is the people's will that must be respected by those who are the office bearers, as it were, of the रियासत.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया मलिया, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया एजाज चौधरी साहब. मलिया की किताब का एक जुमला है जो मैं यहाँ दोहराऊंगी कि रूल ऑफ लॉ की ज़रूरत है. वी आर रूल्ड विदाउट लॉ. किताब खरीदिए, बहुत उम्दा किताब है. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपकी हाज़िरी का. थैंक यू.